Welcome back to the Coachable Podcast. You're tuning in for our final episode of the WomanIsHer mini-series. This has been a 6-week podcast mini-series all about women's empowerment, expression, embodiment, and personal liberation as it pertains to the WomanIsHer program that we are launching in 2025. And enrollment is open now if you're interested in joining us for that program. But today we want to kind of complete this series by talking about 4 of the hidden blocks that I think we face as women and these opportunities for healing when it comes to healing the wounded feminine within each of us, and how if we're doing this healing work, it requires us to confront these 4 aspects of our life and sometimes our shadow. And those are the mother, money, men, and the masculine. And so we're going to kind of deep dive into each of these and give you an idea of what that looks like, what that means for you. And maybe as you listen to this conversation, you can identify some of the areas where maybe you need a little bit more attunement or work or awareness around what your relationship is to these things, and where there's opportunity for growth, healing, and just reclamation of your internal wholeness, where we're not in unhealthy dynamics with any of these aspects of ourselves or these things in our lives. And so I want to open it up by talking about the mother, which is a not a small topic, but the mother wound and how that affects us as women, where that stems from, and if we don't look at our relationship to our mothers, how that contributes to the wounded feminine being passed down generation after generation after generation. Yeah. So I'm curious, just opening up this space of what does mother wound work look like for you personally, and what has been, what's been your experience with this? Because it's definitely an opportunity for us to heal some deep
I know
trauma.
For me, and I think a lot of women will resonate with this, a big part of the mother wound for me was witnessing my mother be the martyr my whole life. Very self-sacrificial, no center of self. And then that manifests as me doing that my whole life. And almost it was very like this need to belong everywhere. And so I could fit in anywhere and get everyone to like me, but I had no center of self. And it was always dependent upon, my safety was dependent on everyone liking me, essentially, which is not a good place to be at all. And so for me, starting to heal that and deconstruct that has been taking those courageous actions, asking for what I want, and being okay with people saying no and leaving my life if they don't align, and really owning my desires, my voice, and giving myself that permission that a lot of the women, like if I look back at, my ancestry, all the women in my life, grandparents, there was a lot of even abuse to the women, and they just stayed, it was very much the ancestry of my family. And so that for me was a lot of the mother wound work is I'm not just going to sit by and be the martyr. I'm not just going to sit by and let people take advantage of me or use me for things. Like I get to have my own identity, desires, passion, pleasure, joy, and create my own reality. And I think a lot of women can probably relate with that wounding of the martyr, the self-sacrificial. Yeah.
I mean, the mother wound is the pain that's rooted in our relationship that we have with our mothers. And think to even acknowledge that exists is the first step.
Yeah.
I think so many of us struggle with acknowledging sometimes the pain that has been caused from our moms because we want to protect them.
Yeah.
And we want to, we don't want to hurt them by saying, oh, actually this thing impacted me, or this thing had an effect on me. But if you've listened to the previous episodes that we've done, I've talked a bit about my relationship to my mother, things I learned about being a woman from my mother, because she was and is our first example of what it means to be a woman.
Yeah.
And so if we grow up with moms who don't love themselves, who don't love their bodies, who are disconnected, then that is what we learn to be. How can we learn to love ourselves if we don't have anyone teach us how?
Yeah.
You know? And so I think in opening that discussion and opening up that dialogue within the privacy of our own hearts first, and then potentially with a trusted friend, you know, there's levels that we can go to with healing this wound.
Yeah.
I think it first starts with acknowledging what we didn't learn, what we did learn and what we didn't, you know, and what is our idea of what it means to be a woman, and how was that shaped by the example that we had in our mom, and what about that is rooted in truth, and what about is rooted in lies or illusion, you know?
And for people, you know, I saw this in my family. I had a very blended, extended family with like foster kids and stuff. It's like for the kids who didn't have a mother.
Sure.
It's like, then it's like, okay, a lot of times it's different cultural context, you know, social media, music, like the feminine they're taking in as archetypes in that way, which has its own wounding and projections, because oftentimes it's a narrative by our culture, which is very patriarchal in nature, you know, so it's like fit that certain box, like we talked about on the last episode, be pretty, don't be a mess, be put together, or, you know, be a boss, and like whatever it is, there's so many distortions of the feminine that we receive, and that's that mother wound. It's like the distorted feminine that we then take onto ourselves and then live into our lives.
Absolutely. So I think that's the first one. It's like can be hidden for a lot of us, but once we look at it and once we kind of open ourselves up to getting curious about that, I think it becomes pretty obvious. And I really believe that in order to fully live in our personal liberation and power, that is a wound that has to be addressed and has to be looked at. And with all of these that we're going to discuss today, it requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to look at some uncomfortable truths. And I'm not here to this is not a like, let's beat up on moms, you know?
I love my mom.
We love
my mama.
women, and like I have so much respect for mothers. And I truly believe whether it's our mothers or whether you're a mother, we're all doing the best we can with what we know and what we have and the tools that we have at the time. And understanding that our mothers were women and humans too, with their own set of struggles and their own dreams and their own aspirations and their own programming and their own trauma. And one of the things that has really helped me in doing some of this mother wound work healing has been taking my mother off the pedestal of being this perfect, or like this idea of what a woman should be or was, and seeing her as just a human being. Yeah.
I think for me, even like reflecting, especially now that I'm in my 30s, which my parents, when I think back, I'm like, dang, they had me in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so all of a sudden I see them, and they didn't even have the resources, the world. We didn't have the internet like this. You know, you didn't have information at your fingertips when they were raising me. And so then I almost am like, wow, these were children raising children. And it really humbles me and my compassion for them and the humanity of them, because I'm just like, yeah, I'm in my 30s and I still feel like a child sometimes. There's moments where I'm just like, where's my adult? Like,
who's allowing me to do life like this?
Like, who let me have this much responsibility? Like, I get to make all these choices. And so, I like that what you said about taking off the pedestal even. It's just because we do naturally, as children, you know, there are protectors.
They're our idea of God.
Yeah.
You know?
Food comes from them. Shelter comes from
everything.
Them. Law comes from them. And so, once you're an adult, it's deconstructing that and really finding the truth, the reality of it all, the humanity, and what serves you and what does not serve. So you can let go from that place of grace. Yeah.
And I think one last thing around this is like, when you really start doing the mother wound healing work is when you start becoming your own internal mother.
Yeah.
When you step into the role of the mother to mother yourself.
Yeah.
And one of my teachers always says, we grieve our parents twice. We grieve their death and we grieve who they weren't for us.
Yeah.
Like letting go of the idea of who they should have been or what they didn't give us, and like grieving who they were. And then so we can come into reality with that relationship instead of continuing to go back to wanting to get the love of a parent that maybe we didn't get, or the validation or the approval or the acceptance. How do we become our own internal mother that provides that sense of safety and soothing and love, affection, and adoration that we needed, maybe that we didn't receive, whether we had an absent mother, she wasn't there, she wasn't emotionally available, she was stressed, she was struggling mentally, whatever it might be, or maybe she was really present, but you know, how can we step into the role of that, you know, parent for ourselves?
Yeah.
I think really is what takes that to the next level.
Totally. Yeah. It's that inner reparenting. Because that's the other piece. It's like, even if you had parents who were present and did their best to be emotionally available and conscious, you are your own unique iteration of a soul, and they might not know how to have met your soul's expression. You might be vastly, like I used to tease my parents. My dad's an engineer, my mom's a scientist, and then I was this weird artsy theater kid. And I'd be like, cool. Did you guys find me behind a dumpster? Because even my brother was like a math genius. And so I was like, where did I come from?
I don't fit here.
I don't belong in this family. And so even if my parents had been the most conscious, whatever, they still might have struggled to be like, how do we meet this child's chosen soul expression of being artistic and theatrical and things like that? Yeah. And so even within that, I think no matter how conscious your parents are, there's always going to be this journey. And it's a beautiful gift you get to give yourself too, of really that inner mothering, that nurturing, that unconditional love, that meeting yourself. And it can be really beautiful and sweet, while also confronting and painful in moments.
Yeah. But I think it's the work that we have to be willing to do to get what we want out of this experience, because otherwise we're unconsciously going to pass down the same kind of programming and coping strategies, the things we saw. Even if you think you've gone in the exact opposite direction of your mother, it's so subtle and of the ways that sometimes we revolt against, like, oh, I'll never be like my mom. Yeah. So I'm going to be the exact opposite. But you're carrying that pain and that hurt around with you as the motivational force for being different than your mother. And if you carry that, you will unconsciously project that pain into your children, or like that's how it gets just passed down. And
if you're at any extreme, you're in a wound. So even if you're revolting against your mothers, you're still in a wounding, you're still in a shadow, which is going to create turmoil and suffering and pain. And, and that's another piece. It's like when you don't fix the mother wound, it impacts your relationship with other women. And so if you're a woman, for example, who I hear this a lot with women of like, oh, I can't have girlfriends. I don't have good girlfriends. And it's something I've learned I had to track on my journey is I've never experienced that. I've always had great female friends, but I remember then I was a bit naive. And I remember meeting a woman one time who she was a bit older than me. And in hindsight, I now see the lesson here. But in the beginning, she met me immediately, was like, you're my best friend. She's in her 50s. She didn't have any other female best friends. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, this is predictable of what's going to happen. At some point, I'm going to be the villain because that's her pattern. She's at this age, doesn't have any close female friends because she has a wound that she's now projecting upon every friend that gets close to her, which is exactly what happened. And so it alienates you, it creates this division because you have not, it's the wholeness we talked about, like coming home to that wholeness. You have division within yourself, and therefore it's going to manifest, it's going to recreate in your outer reality.
Totally.
Yeah.
So that's the mother. That's the invitation to look at this block that you may or may not have worked through yet. And something that I think will be top of mind in the program. These things will be infused, as we talk about them and how we relate to the mother in terms of our relationship to ourselves. And the second block is around money.
Everyone unclench your asshole now. Take a deep breath.
Money. You know, I think this one it's interesting in terms of culture. A lot of times I think it's projected in like the damsel in distress, like help me, save me. Someone else come provide for me and take care of me.
It's very culturally acceptable as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
It can be seen and projected in that way. It can also be manifest in your life as just the hamster on the hamster wheel of always hustling, always grinding, burning yourself out and chasing money, saying like, because you want to go in the, like you said, if you're at any, like you could be on two sides of the spectrum, but both are in wounding when you're not in harmony and balance between the masculine and feminine. And so when you're in the chasing money, I need money to make me feel a certain way, to make me feel safe, to make me feel whatever, then it can be coming from that wounded place too.
It's oftentimes a not enoughness wound.
Sure.
Not enough, scarcity.
Yeah. So I think part of it in terms of money is looking at our narratives that we have around money and maybe even that our moms had around money.
Yeah. So oftentimes it's like, what were the phrases that your parents reflected often? Like I know my parents, for example, money doesn't grow on trees. You need to sacrifice. You need to work hard. You need to give everything, you know? And so it's like reflecting what were things you heard in the household often when there was conversations of money coming up, because oftentimes it's playing then subconsciously and we're just recreating that narrative in the theater of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think everybody has a different kind of take on this. Or me, my mom didn't want to have anything to do with the money in our house. It was she was like, out of sight, out of mind. That's something your dad handles. Yeah. She had no idea what happened in our finances. I had no idea growing up. Yeah. But like, come to find out, my mom was like, I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. And so she just kind of, that was a huge block for her. And she never had to formulate her own, you know, intentional practices or mindfulness around and relationship with money. It was just like, it's not my problem. You're going to handle it. And out of sight is out of mind until you have to deal with financial stress or budgeting or whatever. But she didn't handle money from an empowered an educated place. Yeah. And I think because of that, we lose power because we lose our ability to have agency and choice. Yes. Yeah. And make those choices from an aligned place that are aligned with our soul and our path without being dependent on a man to figure that out for us. Right. So I think part of it is learning to balance those different sides of us, the desire to have safety and security and the desire to self-source. Yeah.
Well, and that's true safety and security comes from self-sourcing. It's that like, I loved what you said there around when we do put it in that out of sight, out of mind, I'm going to rely on someone else. We are externally giving someone that power over us, even in subtle ways. And, you know, it's one of the things they teach us in business courses and stuff that it's like, when you're new to business, you want to learn every aspect of your business. Doesn't mean you're going to have to run every aspect of your business for the rest of your life, but you need to have the basic understanding of every aspect, because otherwise, you're going to hire people in. How do you know if they're even doing their job?
Totally.
If you know it. And so the same applies in these relationships in our life. It's like, okay, we're not saying if you're in a marriage, you have to be the one running your financial resources and have the autonomy and agency to be well-informed and have a healthy relationship with it versus, once again, those polarities of like, ooh, I just want to avoid it or, ooh, I need to be hyper-controlling of it. Like, I love you said harmonious with it, that place of like, can I just be in harmony and be well-informed, have that agency?
Yeah, because it's powerful to be like, we're having, if you're in a partnership with a man or a woman, like whatever that dynamic looks like, but saying, these are all the things that impact our life, our health, our money, our, you know, our physical intimacy, you know, our environment, all of these things. And these are all the puzzles or pieces, slices of the pie, essentially. And how we divvy those up doesn't necessarily depend on gender roles. It's how do we want to be responsible for these things in our lives? And like empowering us to do, sometimes what's in my zone of genius is different than what's in your zone of genius, but we're going to have that open communication. And then, like you said, decide accordingly from a place of agency and autonomy versus a lack of awareness and unconsciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, we're all, especially if you're a business owner, or you have a side hustle or whatever, or you're just a single woman providing for yourself. We all have to have a conversation and do some work around what is our relationship to money, because money stress is something that a lot of women struggle with. And how can we address that from a place of power instead of victimhood and powerlessness?
Yeah. Which a lot of it's like being informed and looking at it. There's so many people. There's a podcast I've been watching about like finances and stuff, like really keep me informed. But, in it, the biggest pattern I notice is people just trying to avoid it and acting like, well, if I never look at it, I just don't know.
Doesn't exist.
That's not reality.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you really, with finances, the more you can root yourself in reality, the healthier you're going to be. And not from a place of fear,
right?
But from that centered place of its agency, just like we talked about on the last episode with shifting for us to natural tracking our cycles. It gave us agency, it gave us information, it gave us knowledge and power. And so looking at finances the same, it's like, okay, I just sat down and did my budgeting recently, and it was not the funnest experience, but at the same time, I feel so clear now.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I know where my challenges are. I know where my strong points are. And now I'm clear on what actions I need to take moving forward to have more ease.
Exactly.
And so just the more we can start to bridge that gap and regulating your nervous system through it and healing that connection.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is all about these hidden blocks, and we're trying to make what's hidden, bring it to the light, right? And to look at it. And it doesn't mean it needs to be you'll necessarily need to have a complete overhaul of how you address and deal with these things. Maybe you have a great relationship with this, but it's just about taking these aspects of ourselves and intentionally taking time to observe and sit with and become aware of how they're affecting our lives and what our relationship is with it, so that we can have that healthy, open, honest dialogue with ourselves and with the people in our lives in a way that feels empowering.
Yeah.
So number 3, in terms of these blocks and these opportunities for being initiated into higher levels of wholeness, is our relationship with men.
Which is a fun one in our culture.
Yeah. Whether that is our father or our brothers or men that we are romantically involved with, or even the men that are our platonic friends. But this can be the father, the partner, the teacher, God.
Yeah. Oftentimes our father is the initial, much like the mother, the initial archetype. And it's funny because, there's so many women who are like, I never want to date my father. And then if someone objectively looked at their dating patterns, they're like, well, you've been dating your father.
Yeah.
Like, it might be subtle. It might be like, oh, this man's emotionally avoidable, avoidant. Thank you. Yeah. He is avoidable too. We can't avoid it if we look at this shit. And so you're repeating these patterns. Yeah. And then it's like, why do I keep attracting this emotionally unavailable man? Oh, well, my father was emotionally unavailable, and that's what I think is acceptable. That's what I tolerate. That's maybe sometimes it's all you think is possible. Yeah. That was the one for me recently.
This is what I have to accept.
Yeah. I all of a sudden had some new experiences with new men in my life that are at different levels. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can have whatever I want. How amazing. New reference points. But I think it comes from really getting clear on where are we creating these unconscious patterns from our fathers, our brothers, our even young relationships.
Totally. And the things that have wounded us from those, and really sitting with that, because I think when we look at our dating history, our relationship history, and whether the faces and the names have changed, the common denominator is us in all of those things, and seeing what are the common threads, what are the through lines, what do these things have in common? Yeah. And that can be confronting. It can be challenging, but it's so empowering and liberating, because you realize I don't have to keep repeating the cycle. I don't have to keep it's like the saying, if you don't get the lesson, you repeat the class, essentially. Right? Definitely. So a lot of us just recycle the same types of experiences over and over again, whether we're in a relationship with men who are emotionally unavailable, or men that abuse us, or men that, are so passive that we walk all over and that we emasculate. That can be the pattern, right? It doesn't have to be the men or the thing, like and
a lot of times that's a protective pattern of like, I don't want to get hurt, so I'm going to be the one who has all the power.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to let you know that you
can't hurt me.
You can't run the show. And instead, I'm going to
put you in your place.
Yep. Yeah. Those are all things that as women, it's our job and our responsibility to look at, instead of living in that place of victim and being like, oh, men have done this, and this to me. That is not a a powerful place to live from.
You can't change from that place.
No.
You're giving your power away. It was same as my therapist. Someone was saying to me recently, they're like, I always love when I realize that I'm the problem, because that means I can do something about it. And so
it's my fault all the time.
More you realize like where you're creating your own pain or suffering and everything, like, cool, like it might suck for a moment. You might have to grieve abandoning yourself or creating I've had to grieve so many times when I realize I'm the villain in my own story. And I'm just like, damn it, really? We're doing this again, Avery? And then on the other side of that grief though, I'm like, cool. That means I can change it now because I see how I'm creating this, why I'm creating this. If I don't want to do it again, okay, what am I going to do differently in the future?
Or maybe it's even something like you crave a man that's emotionally vulnerable, but then you shame him for it.
Yes, I've seen that too.
I've seen it too. This is something, honestly, when I think about a moment where I did not show up in my best, and I have held on to, I think about a moment where I was like, that was not a moment I'm proud of.
Yeah.
In relationship. It was a moment where my partner was really struggling. And this was years and years ago. So I was at a completely different place in my life. Yeah. But I kind of looked like, looked down on him for having that moment of vulnerability, and was just kind of like very cold and just like deal with it. And that's
Can't imagine you doing that now.
I know.
Like, oh my God,
it's not a moment that I'm proud of. And I've thought about that so much and where that came from and why I thought that was the appropriate response to that moment. And
I think a lot of women do.
But I was trying to hurt him.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
When I'm really honest, I was trying to punish him for something. And the work is looking at all of that. Yeah. To even be honest that there's a part of you that wants to punish somebody, that wants to hurt somebody because you've been hurt. Yep. To look at all of our shadows. Yeah. And because I think we only create a more beautiful world and create relationships that are really healthy to be in when we look at what is how do we contribute to this unhealthy dynamic? And if you're in a toxic relationship, you're toxic too.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that was like one of the patterns I had to take accountability for recently, was like, as you know, I'm consciously relating, and there was someone I had been relating with, and there had been a moment where it's become a pattern that, not intentionally, they're just not honest with themselves, meaning they're not doing the inner work. So they were unintentionally not keeping their word, which is lying. They're lying to themselves, they're lying to me. My nervous system became dysregulated with that. And rather than me being like, okay, I realize I have this pattern, the conscious thing for me is to remove myself. Instead, I became dysregulated and became anxious. And then now I look at it and I'm like, so now we're both unhealthy, because now I'm being anxious and annoying and obnoxious while I know this person's under-resourced and can't meet me in it. So I'm no better than this person. Now we're both just dysfunctionally relating. Right. And so then the moment you shift that is like, okay, what do I need to do to break this cycle? For me, it's, okay, I need to step away from this relating. And so, it's the moment we have that insight, because if you're relating in it, the dysfunction, you're dysfunctional.
You're also contributing to that dynamic.
Yeah, there's a part of you, and it's a lot of times that unconscious wounding that's trying to prove something. Like, even for me, if I look at it and I'm really honest, it was the part of me that was like trying to prove that I was enough.
Which is
and it's like so attached. It's like, why am I carrying this dysfunctional? It's so unhealthy. But it's because my wounding wants to prove that I'm enough. And it's like, okay, if I accept that I am enough, I can totally let this go. Here we go. Now I'm open.
And that healing of the enoughness or the worthiness wound, which we think, is not a one and done thing. No. You get to keep coming back and relearning this over and over. But that's where you have to become that responsible parent, mother or father to yourself that reminds you, you are worthy, you are lovable, you are enough. But instead of seeking that from this external person or partner, and basically it's like, I'm still trying to get the love of my father that I didn't receive, or the approval and the acceptance of through this other person. Yeah. I'm trying to heal a wound.
Which isn't fair to them either.
Yeah, that they didn't cause.
Yeah.
And
they didn't ask for this responsibility.
That is my job. That is my work. And when we're in relationship, it's two individuals who get to be fully responsible for their work. And we are wounded in relationship, and we also get to heal in relationship. And the other thing that has struck me recently is I posted something on Instagram and TikTok, and it both went hella viral over the last week. And it was just the most simple thought. And it was actually from a TikTok that I saw scrolling. And it was this concept of, are you really healed? Or are you just self-isolated from the things that trigger you? Yeah. And the thing is there was so much back and forth engagement in the comment section about people being like, I'm so good on I don't want to surround myself with toxicity or negativity. Like, why would I?
Yeah, but we're not saying you have to do that.
Put myself in these situations. And I get it. There is a time period for walking away from things.
Yes.
But true healing happens in the reintegration back into, that's why
and in relationship with others.
Is in relationship. Yeah. So it's not, if you have a sex addiction, it's not saying I'm never going to have sex again.
Yeah.
It's literally, how do you reintegrate into a relationship where you can have a healthy dynamic with sex or with a different person, right? If you've had a lot of unhealthy relationships, it doesn't mean you need to be the solution is not, I'm never going to be in a relationship again. We don't get better at relationships by avoiding relationships.
And it's not saying to stay in a toxic, the key that you said, and this has been the distinction for me, is both people need to be doing the work.
100%.
If the other person is continuously showing up and doing the work with me, I will keep relating. I will keep showing up. The moment that it has become clear that the other person is not doing the work that I'm doing, then I move away. But I'm not going to stop dating. I'm going to keep dating. I'm going to keep putting, because I'm learning so much. I'm growing so much. And so, nobody's saying you have to put, I love how humans do that. Well, I'm not staying somewhere toxic. No one said you had to stay somewhere. Why'd you go there?
Yeah, exactly.
That's just a narrative of yourself, which also shows a wounding within that. Why do you assume the only way to learn is in these toxic experiences? Where's that coming from? What wounding or healing or story or narrative have you told yourself that is, well, if I'm out in the world or I'm relating with people, they're all toxic. It's all drama. It's what?
Well, this is a lot of the narrative people can have around their families.
Yeah.
Or they're like, I'm not going to be around my family because they're toxic or they're this or they're that. And that's, I think it's like Ram Dass, or I can't remember who it is that says, he's like, you want to see how healed you are? Go spend a week with your family. Yes. It's and it's the holidays, you guys. This is the time when so many people are triggered. And this is where you really get to practice what you're learning as you do this self-healing work. It's like you only get to really see how you're doing when you reintegrate back into these environments where it's actually going to test you and you can make a new choice. When you're being triggered with the potential of getting dysregulated, or there's an old thing getting activated, and you see, oh, this thing doesn't affect me in the same way it used to. That's how you start to notice if you're healing, if you're making progress, or you're like, oh, that comment from my mom or that comment from my dad would have set me in a spiral. Now I can notice it and I can choose a different response. That's how you see if you're actually healing, not just avoiding the places that trigger you.
Because that's so big in our culture too right now, is the whole the victim and then safe spaces. Right. Okay, we won't even get into that. It's first of all, announcing a safe space is very egoic in the first place, because what's safe to me will not always be safe to everybody else. So if I'm like, this is a safe space, the fuck? I can't assure that to everybody. That's definitely coming from a place of I think I know the best for everybody, because what triggers me isn't going to be the same trigger for everybody else. And so I think we have this culture right now where everyone's like, I want a safe space. I want this. But safe space just breeds softness, complacency. People don't have the edge, the push to grow. I'm not saying go out and be like violent or harmful to people, of course, but we need that discomfort, like you're saying, to know where's the edge, where do I need to grow, where's the areas that I'm not fully integrated, that I'm not fully liberated. Because if everyone outside you is constantly triggering you, they all have power over you. You're so disempowered from that place. It's when you can get in the places that would normally, like you said, and you're just like, cool. Then you really are reclaiming that power within yourself that, like, I love that like term unfuckwithable. I'm unfuckwithable from this place. It doesn't matter what you've been through or the diagnosis. That's the biggest thing. There's so many like terms and labels for everything now that just really, rather than taking it as, oh, you know, I can use this term or this label to better understand my function and my seasons and how I move in the world, my rhythms, we take it oftentimes in our culture as a victim label to disempower us and almost make us incapable of things instead of just using it as information to empower ourselves and how we move in the world.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl in A Man's Search for Meaning says, in between stimulus and response, there's a pause. And that pause is what makes all the difference. Basically, it's like, there's always going to be a stimulus, the thing that might activate you or trigger you. And then there's your response. And we can measure our growth, our healing, our progress, our transformation based on our response to that same stimulus. And sometimes when we're just not as affected, it doesn't spiral you. It doesn't knock you off. It doesn't derail you for 2 days before you can, you know, when someone makes some comment to you, before you can get back to a regulated place. Like, that's how you really know. But how would you know if there's never any stimulus? Right. And so that's why I say you can't fully heal in isolation. That's why healing happens in community.
Yeah, you got to make your body the safe place.
Totally.
When your home in your body, which is what this work is, which is what this program is. It's like when you make your body the safe place, then you can go out and be in communities and it feels nourishing and fulfilling and also sometimes lessons and challenging, but you can receive it.
And we understand that like the women that are going to come into WomanIsHer are going to have be at all different places with this work. You know, if you're in a place where you're like, I can't be, I'm like not on the men train. Like, get away from me if you're a man. Like, that doesn't mean there's not a place for you inside this program, but we're going to challenge you to find your edges around where it is safe for you to start to reintegrate certain things into your life. Because this is about the reclamation of your wholeness, and we're not empowered when we're living in places of isolation and avoidance.
And being totally transparent, when I was younger, I was a man eater. I was terrible to men. Like, if I'm really on, it's been like a challenging journey of forgiving myself. It was very heartbreaking to reflect on how I was awful to men. And then I would blame them. I'd be like, well, don't be mad. I beat you at your own game. What? You made the game. I just play it better than you. And like, in hindsight, I'm like, that is foul. Like, that is so mean. But in my mind, I was like, well, I'm just playing their game. Like, but it's just so unconscious. And so it's just sharing that. It's like, wherever you're at, if you're really open and willing to sit in the courage, your whole reality in these ways can change when you take that accountability and have that awareness and are willing to step into the edges and trusting, especially in these containers. You're so supported because no matter what, there's going to be reflections of you in this container, like other people who have similar wounds, similar stories, similar programs. And the beauty is that you have these reflections in people who were all doing this together. You have the support. So even if you're just like, I'm spiraling, I don't know what to do. It's like, okay, cool. We have got you. We're here for you because we're all on this journey. We've all had these moments.
Yeah. And these are like, none of us escape these 4 things: mother, money, men. There is no planet in which we live on where those things don't exist. And this last one, which is the masculine, our own internal masculine, understanding that we all have the feminine energy and the masculine energies within us. And a lot of us have an unhealthy relationship with our own internal masculine. And so for me, what that has looked like is on becoming aware of where I was overly dominating in my masculine, meaning I was on the rat race. I was on the hamster wheel. I was hustling. I was grinding. I was burning myself out. I was not being vulnerable with myself or with other people. I was doing in the energy of performance. I was, moving at a very fast pace in life. And part of reorienting to the masculine within me was actually seeing how I was over functioning in that and slowing the fuck down.
Yeah.
Which
I think that's a lot of our women in our culture. Because I resonate a lot with that for sure. And I think that's a lot of, obviously I think a lot of our men as well, but I think a lot of women have, it's in that. It's like the achiever and it creates these walls. Like you said, we don't then open up vulnerably to other people, let alone the masculine. And what one of my friends had to reflect to me recently when I was like going through the dating stuff. And I was like, these men, they keep like respecting me and wanting to be my friend, telling me I'm just really intimidating. Like, what the heck? Like, no, like, why don't they want to date me? And he's like, well, because you have a tendency of, you might have a vulnerable moment and instead of bringing it to the guy, you intellectualize and find all the answers and then you bring them the solution. And he's like, and so then as a man, they're just like, well, okay, cool. She doesn't need me. Like, she's good. Like, I respect it. There's no drama, but like, what am I doing here? There's no polarity then. And so when we're in that hyper masculine all the time, then we also aren't ever softening into the feminine for relationship, for just re-nourishing ourselves. I feel like that's that symbiosis between the two is the feminine is like that wellspring that the masculine energy can come back to and fill up so that they can go out and create in the world. And that's even the dance within ourselves. It's like, okay, cool, our masculine, go create, make it, hold this container of our creation, our reality, and then come back into our own feminine and fill it up. Okay, yay. Like now I'm nourished again and ready to go create in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, working with balancing the masculine and the feminine within me has also looked like, like I said, learning to slow down and to be with my experience and to be in my body versus being in my mind, which we've talked a lot about in this series. And in our last episode, we talked about the womb. It's like being with and feeling my feelings. And when we're in the achiever doer position, there's not time for that. That actually, there's the story that takes away from our productivity and our ability to get things done.
Start to like judge ourselves harshly for this.
And so it's really looked at like creating the internal safety that I needed that was necessary to reconnect with my own softness. And so how can I be the masculine and the feminine? The one that provides the safe container for myself to fall apart and allow myself to be with the experience of falling apart or not having it together or being in the midst of questions and bringing that to the moment and saying, I'm in the unknown, I'm in the in-between and I don't have the solution right now versus how do I bypass this discomfort so quickly that I just jump to a solution, even if it's not the right solution for me.
It creates chaos.
So I just avoid being with the discomfort. And so much, so much of the healing work of balancing, my masculine has been in the exhale, in the slowing down, in the softening, and also in the play. Of like learning to just be.
And that you don't have to always know. That's that big part of letting the masculine like hold your feminine. Because sometimes we talked about this in the womb one. There's times as I've been on this journey, I'll be like, what do I need? And sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. And it's letting yourself be okay in that I don't know. And that's where that play comes up because then you can discover through the play. It's like, I've had times where I'm like, I don't know, maybe I need a bath and I'll go run the bath and I'll sit in the bath and I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want a bath. Okay, that's fine. We can get out of the bath. Like, get out of the bath. Okay, well, what else? Maybe I'm hungry. Okay, let's try some. Okay. Oh yeah, I just needed some food. Like, sometimes you really just have to play in it and discover and let it be that journey of figuring it out, because you're so new to being in the body and holding that space rather than overriding it.
Yeah.
It's literally like having this new baby that you're just like, I've never had a baby. What do I do with this baby right now?
Yeah.
What does the baby need?
Right.
Yeah.
And that process of creating safety within yourself is our responsibility. And it's not for us to outsource to anyone else.
It's never sustainable that way.
Yes, we get to create dynamics that we choose to participate in that foster that safety.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's on us.
Yeah.
And that's not me saying you should settle for being in relationships where men don't make you feel safe because it's your responsibility. That is not what I'm saying.
Not at all.
But we become empowered and whole when we learn that it's something we can give ourselves. And that might mean, okay, I'm going to actually remove myself from a situation that's not safe, because I'm going to create the safety for myself versus expecting you to do it. So what that actually requires for me is to leave certain situations.
Because that's the thing. It's like oftentimes when we're outsourcing, we put ourselves in environments with people who cannot give us that safety.
Right.
And then we stay because we don't believe that we can create it on our own.
Exactly.
And so, once you start to create, you realize that. And oftentimes you will notice that you will remove yourself from situations with people who cannot hold the safety with you. You're just like, like my example of the dysregulated relationship the dysfunctional relationship that I was participating in. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, this person cannot co-regulate with me. I'm going to remove myself because I can regulate myself. And I already have amazing people around me who can co-regulate with me. So why would I continue to participate in this experience unless I believed that I could not regulate myself? So there's such a powerful shift when you start to do, and it's a journey and it's a practice. Even as you hear, I mean, I still put myself in those situations sometimes, but the more that you do it, the stronger the muscle becomes and the more it becomes the reality you get to live in.
Well, and I hope you guys hear that, like, the standard is not perfection. Standard is not that we're going to get this right 100% of the time. The standard is that we try. The standard is that we put effort into what we can control. There are things that are completely outside of our control, but it's being responsible for and taking authority over our own lives and own personal experiences and our own reactions and responses to the things that, we can't control. That is what's powerful. And it's not about creating lives where we have perfected all of our circumstances and all of our relationships are perfect and our relationship to money is perfect and our mom and us are besties and our dad and I have no issues. And it's not that. It's not that. It's building a life where you are your own authority. You are your own peacekeeper, and you are no longer outsourcing or seeking for something outside of yourself, because you understand that all of that, your external world is a reflection of your internal world. And I think that's the opportunity for all of us that we get to lean into when we give ourselves the permission to look at these 4 blocks that we all face. Every single one of us. None of us are exempt from these dynamics and aspects and wounds in our life, but it is our responsibility and it is our opportunity.
Yeah, and I like to look at it as there's moments that we fall asleep and we just become unconscious of what's happening. And the moment you have the conscious awareness again, that's when you get to be responsible and take that action and have that authority to change it. And then giving yourself that grace, because we're all going to fall asleep in moments. And it's just the more you can bridge the gap between being asleep and being conscious of the conscious creator of what's happening, that's when you hit those sweet spots. And it's just like going to the gym. It takes practice, it takes devotion, it takes consistency. see. And a lot of grace and humility and forgiveness and community. Community is a game changer.
Yeah.
The community, the people you're around, the environments where you're putting your energy and attention. And I know we hear it all the time. Cliches are cliches because they're true. That's just the reality.
Sure.
That's the biggest thing I've learned on this journey. It's like the things that I'd hear in the beginning, I'd be like, meh, it's so simple, blah, blah, blah. I hear that statement all the time. The deeper I get on the journey, the more I'm like, oh no.
They were right.
They were right. It's so true. It's not simple. Like not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah.
And that's why we hear those statements said so often because there's so much truth in them.
And I hope you hear that is one of the biggest things that we hope that you take away from the Womanizer program. If you choose to join us in February for the first cohort of this program, it's a 4-month program where we're going to be exploring these topics of our healing the wounded feminine, reclaiming our pleasure, our play, our power, of releasing shame and judgment and guilt that we've been carrying. And one of the biggest takeaways I hope you receive is community, is the healing that happens in being witnessed in your process. And that in the moments that you do fall asleep, it's like Ram Dass says, we're all just walking each other home. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to forget, you're going to forget, we're going to slip up. We're going to have moments of doubt and insecurity that creep in. But as your family, as your community, as your friends, and as the women who are committed to living lives that are our own, where we are the main character, where we are in the driver's seat, we're going to be here to remind you when you forget. And the value in that is you can't put a price on. You can't.
The moments that like, I'm thinking about even moments where I've fallen asleep and become unconscious. And it's funny because when I reflect on oftentimes what brings me out of it has been a friend just asking me a question. There's so many times like Tori, even I've been hanging out with her. I'll be sharing some story and then she'll just ask some simple question. I'm like, oh shit. And I remember another friend even was sharing a like dramatic story and he was like, yeah, well, you're choosing to participate in that. I was like, oh shit. And so it's like, that's what happens in community. It's like there's times we'll fall asleep and if you're in the right community, someone will just say one little sentence and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm awake again.
Yeah, the light comes back on.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I see something I didn't see before.
Yeah.
And those are miracle moments.
Yes.
It's this that shift in perception. And that's the goal of this program, is to keep creating moments where we keep waking up and to our own divinity, to our own power, to our own worthiness and our enoughness. And that we are whole, you know, and the releasing of the judgment and the internal narratives that keep us stuck in a mindset that tells us that we're not enough, that we're too much, that we're going to lose ourselves, and realizing that we are our own advocate and friend and partner and authority. And that is going to be women who are rooted in that energy is going to be what changes the world. I really believe that. And so if you want to be part of this program, we would love for you to join us in Womanizer. You can go to the link in the show notes to grab and save your spot. We begin at the beginning of February, and we are thrilled to welcome this first cohort of women who are really deeply committed to their own healing and personal liberation. And I can't wait to see what comes of it. Any final words from you on what you're excited for?
I'm really excited to witness the blossoming of everyone. My favorite is witnessing each person having their individual magic. That's the thing. It's each of you you're not going to look like us, whatever that journey looks like. And to me, that's the beauty, is getting to see the multifaceted magic that is birthed through each person's individual expression.
You just get to own it. Own you, being you in your fullness and your expression, and loving that is so attractive,
it's radiant,
so powerful, so radiant. And it's what the world needs. So make sure to go to the show notes, save your spot for Womanizer while enrollment is still open. And if you have any questions about this program or what you can expect, you can send us an email to info@revivelasvegas.com, or you can send Avery or I a DM on social media. I am the Tori Gordon, and she is
at Avery.May.
And that's how you can connect with us offline. That is the end as we wrap up the mini series of the Womanizer mini series on this show. But we're so grateful for you tuning in. And if this resonated with you, We ask that you share it with a friend, maybe someone else who needs to hear it, or leave us a rating and review. That is the number one way you can say thank you and make sure this episode and the show gets out to more listeners. But from the bottom of my heart to yours, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's it for this episode, but we'll see you soon and see you next week on the Coachable Podcast. See ya.